Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Today, the consumer champion, Martin Newman, joins us to discuss how to leverage e-commerce and digital to capitalize on key consumer trends. Evolv has hosted 14 webinars in the Think CX Digital Leaders Tell All series. Evolv is an AI-driven solution for digital growth optimization that serves the best experience to each audience every time. If you have any questions, please ask in the chat area. If we don't have time to address live, we will respond through email after the event. Thanks so much for joining us, Martin. I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Martin. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. So, excuse me, the core subject that I'm going to talk about today, yes, leveraging e-commerce and digital to capitalize on key consumer trends, but really for me, it is all about consumer empowerment, and that's going to be the focus of my session. So thank you all for joining. Thank you very much to Maren and John, who I know are joining on the West Coast US, which is about 2:30 or 2:45 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So that's a big commitment, but thank you to you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about me and give you a little bit of introduction to my background. As you'll be able to tell, I can clearly talk the talk. What's interesting when I think about customer centricity is I've been talking about this stuff for a long time. This was from the London School of Economics back in 2014. I was doing a keynote when I was running a consulting business called Practicology, and you can see the headline there is about customer-centric approach to driving sales. You'll see something similar in a minute when I talk about my second book. This is my first book, 100 Practical Ways to Improve Customer Experience, that came out August 2018. Still available to buy, shortlisted for the Business Book Awards 2019. Rather rudely, they gave it to someone else. Maybe I'll be lucky enough to be more successful this time. This is my new book, The Power of Customer Experience, and you'll see the line there, how to use customer centricity to drive sales and profitability. So very similar to my keynote going back to 2014. This was published a couple of weeks ago, and it's available on Amazon and, of course, all good platforms. You'll occasionally see my ugly mug popping up on television if you're in the United Kingdom. If you're outside, you might not. That's me with my lockdown here last summer. So sometimes appearing on The One Show, various other BBC, Sky News as a talking head, talking about consumers, talking about retail, and talking about the industry. However, in addition to talking the talk, I can walk it as well. I have walked it. I've walked it for many years, and I continue to do it today with everything that I do. My father used to be an optician. He's sadly no longer alive, long gone from this mortal coil. This was his optical practice in Paisley on the outskirts of Glasgow. He sold it to my cousin, Brian Green, who I think needs a new fascia there with an updated Glasgow phone number. But my dad used to take me to the shop, to the practice, and as a 6-year-old, and I just loved it. I used to see my dad coming out from conducting an eye test on a patient to then selling them glasses, sunglasses. He used to continually update the practices. He had a chain of opticians in Glasgow. The one on the right-hand side still exists. And he used to always invest in updating the practice. And I would say to him, why are you spending all that money doing this? And he said, because, you know, if I don't do it and I don't ensure that I deliver a great experience and maintain my relevance, then obviously it's a growing market. There's lots of competition and our patients will go elsewhere. So that's where I really cut my teeth, I guess, learning about it as a 6-year-old. And then I went on subsequently to work for my dad when I left school. I got involved in digital very early, actually in 1997. So I've been involved in digital and e-commerce for 24 years. This was my flashy CLK Mercedes, W66 for web, WWW for World Wide Web, and that's my daughter Antonia, who's now nearly 25 years of age. Got a wee bit ahead of myself, had a web development business at the time, which crashed and burned in the dot-com growth and boom and bust phase, which many of you will remember. I've had the privilege of running online and multi-channel for some great brands, Burberry, Harrods, Ted Baker, Pentland Brands, who owns Speedo, and many other well-known brands. I created a business called Practicology, a consulting business which I grew to nearly 100 people, and we sold it to a great American business called Pattern, who are a marketplace reseller. I'm on the advisory board of ClearPay, who are the leader in the buy now, pay later space in the UK. I'm on the board of a charity called In Kind Direct, who support thousands of other charities with access to products. I'm the non-exec chair of the retail arm of the Scouts, and I'm the chair of the advisory board for a business called Mayborn Group, whose best known brand is Tommy Tippy. I also run a website called Customer Service Action in my guise as the consumer champion, where I'm essentially allowing consumers to come on and tell us about both their good and their bad experiences. and I'm connecting them with brands, hoping the brands will do something about it, and trying to improve things both for customers and for the brand itself as well. I've also just created a mini MBA in customer centricity in case you're interested. You can see more details of that on my website, and my partner for that is the Oxford College of Marketing and the Oxford College of Leadership and Management. What I want to start by talking about is that today in 2021, there's still far too much focus on the cost to serve. It's a term you're probably familiar with within your own organizations, and I'll tell you why that's an issue. It's an issue because this is not the world we live in anymore. If you go back to pre-internet, 1993, 94, prior to the World Wide Web really taking off, it was all about location, location, location. Whether you're selling to other businesses or whether you're selling to consumers, it was about where you were based. And consumers had limited choice. If you talk about retail, you had high street stores, the odd brand had a catalogue, they were maybe in an out-of-town shopping centre, a shopping mall, and they could have been in a retail park. But ultimately, the customer still had relatively limited choice. So at that time, the balance of power was really held by the brand. Then along came Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who I've shared a stage with, which I'll talk about later on. And he invented the World Wide Web in 1989. But in 1994 began the democratization of retail, because that is when the first transactions were made online. And what that started over like the next 10 years after that was the game-changing move towards proliferation of choice. If you think about it today in 2021, if you have a bad experience in a physical environment, you might just go straight online. If you have a bad experience online with somebody because they haven't optimized the journey for you, you'll just click and go on somebody else's website within a couple of seconds, or you'll go into Google or whatever and find out who else is there that you can buy from. The choice is endless. So that's very much put the power in the hands of the consumer. And of course, in 2007, we had another major event, and that's where Steve Jobs and his compatriot, sadly no longer with us, obviously Steve, his compatriot Jonathan Ives invented the smartphone. And that took us to where we are today, which is anything. We can buy anything, we can buy it anytime, and we can pretty much buy it any place. So if you agree with that, which I'm sure you do, because we're all consumers and we're all enjoying this type of convenience, then you'll understand that customers need to be viewed as a profit center and not a cost center. If you think of them as a cost center and always think about the cost to serve, you'll make the wrong decisions, because you'll take away resources from where they need to be. You'll reduce headcount in your stores. You won't invest in the right technology or the right tools to continually optimize what you're doing. You'll make the wrong decisions. Customers are a profit center. Now, shift clearly happens. There's the first joke, hopefully, of today. Some of you will have done incredibly well over the last 14, 15 months. Sadly, others haven't. And some very well-known brands, as we all know, have gone out of business. But some of you on this webinar today will have done really well, will have seen a huge spike in sales during COVID. However, I guess the downside of that is your targets for this year, next year, maybe the year after, are going to be significant, and you're going to be probably pulling your hair out, or in my case, what's left of it, worrying about how you're going to make your targets, because you had all that growth achieved through COVID, but how do you ensure that you keep what you've managed to gain in terms of new customers over the last 14, 15 months? And then how do you make sure you're able to grow again and take the business onto the next level? And that's really the gist of what I'm going to talk about now. So where's the growth going to come from? First of all, it's going to come from some organic growth of the market. Now, obviously, some of you may know this, some of you may not, but in the UK, prior to the pandemic, 19% of sales were online in the retail sector. So out of all of retail sales, 19% were online, according to the Office of National Statistics. I can tell you that by the end of this year, it's going to look like 28%. So that's a 50% uplift in the matter of 15 months. We have seen essentially 5 to 10 years of e-commerce growth, digital growth online, within the period of the pandemic that we've gone through. So there is still some headroom there that some of you will enjoy, over the rest of this year. The other thing is that our confidence is on the rise again. So this is Deloitte's Consumer Confidence Index. But if you look at any of the consumer confidence indexes, it shows a similar sort of path where things are generally relatively consistent, going from sort of 2014 up to 2020. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. and consumer confidence went through the floor. And clearly, as things open up, we're coming back out of that now, and we're all feeling very confident about the future. The result of that lack of confidence led to us saving money like we've never saved before. This is going back to 1963. And you can see, even when we had, for example, the global financial crash in 2008, we didn't save anything like the kind of, anything like the kind of savings that we've made over the last sort of year and a half. But clearly you can see that reducing now because we're coming out of this and we've got money to spend. So even although sadly, lots of people have lost their jobs, the majority of people have kept them, and the majority of people have saved money over this period because they've been in lockdown. They haven't been able to spend money they would have done previously. They're ready to do that now because we are ready for some revenge consumption. I'm sure, like me, you couldn't wait to get back into a restaurant. You probably can't wait to get to a theatre, to get to a gig, to go to Glastonbury or wherever it happens to be, and to get on a plane and go somewhere. Now, I know we got the kind of concern over, the Indian variant, whatever that looks like, but I'm fairly confident that I doubt very much we're going to go into another lockdown. I've said that before. It was proven wrong, but I'm fairly confident with the level of vaccinations here in the States and in other countries, we are on the pathway, out of this. And that's our opportunity to start to buy again. So from a bigger sort of macroeconomic perspective, I genuinely think we're going to see the roaring 20s again. We saw it 100 years ago. Of course, we know what happened at the end of that. So I don't know whether that's going to happen again, but I do think we're going to have a great next 10 years. If you turn the clock back and you go back to the Second World War, after the Second World War, we had the longest period of economic growth we've ever had. We had 18 years of uninterrupted economic growth, no recessions, basically. And I'm not sure we're going to go through 18 years of growth, but I can certainly see the next decade being a very successful decade for most. And of course, some categories are going to do better than others. Formal wear, for example, we've all been on Zoom calls back to back for the last sort of 15, 16 months. Not many of us have had to wear a shirt and a tie. I was actually on a call with somebody, on a board call with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they had a tie on. I gave them a round of applause. That was great. Not many ladies have had to wear dresses. There's always been that kind of joke, isn't there? Even when you've seen somebody being smart on the top half, are they wearing their pajamas on the bottom half? But categories like this that have underperformed will over-index, because particularly as we're able to go out again, we're able to travel, we need holiday clothes, we need clothes for going to weddings, we need clothes for going to gigs, and so on and so forth. The second is about prioritizing. Consumer empowerment. So really, this is what it's all about. How do you, whether you're in business to business and it's a customer, or whether it's in business to consumer and it's a consumer, how do you empower your customers and your consumers? Because they are the ones, believe me, that I hopefully have proven already, really hold the balance of power. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that not all customers are the same. No two people are necessarily created equal. We're all a bit different in terms of what we're looking for. So every brand you can think of, and this would apply business to business as well, you could have fans who are loyal customers, impulse shoppers, bargain hunters, wanderers, needs-based customers, maybe gift buyers, less so in the business to business space, but certainly within the consumer market. So what are their drivers? Well, fans, people who are genuine fans of the brand, who continue to give you their business time and time again, they're looking for special treatment. What are you going to do for me that makes me feel special because I'm a fan of yours? And really the ideal for any business is, how do you turn customers into fans? That's their nirvana. Impulse shoppers, well, they tend to be led by more promotional activity, maybe things like bestsellers. Other people like me are buying these products, therefore I could be interested. That could catch me at that moment. Bargain hunters tend to be driven only by the sale. Needs or mission-based customers. So I'm a needs-based customer. When I go online, I almost always know, don't do a lot of browsing, I kind of know what I'm looking for. So I'll often go straight into the search function, and heaven forbid, if that search function doesn't work effectively and doesn't take me to the products that I'm looking for, because if they don't, I'm going to go straight to somebody else that can give me that experience. Wanderers, browsers, they need maybe a bit more content, a bit more storytelling to encourage them to engage with the brand. And then gift buyers, who have very specific needs, which might be about ensuring they're able to have a gift delivered to somebody on a specified date, to maybe select gift wrap and a gift card and so on and so forth. So be clear on the different types of needs that all your customers are looking for, whether you're selling to businesses or whether you're selling to consumers. Then you need to think about how do you sweat your assets. And Evolv, who are highly our partner, who are sponsoring this today and putting on the webinar, at the end of the day, they're a fantastic tool. They're there to help you continually optimize the experience on the website and make sure you continue to make it easier for people to buy and therefore driving up for conversion. So always thinking about day after day after day, how do I continue to sweat the assets? How do I continue to do a better job of serving customers as I do than I've done previously? Thinking of yourself as a service provider, retailers and brands are great at selling stuff and the focus is always on selling stuff. But I think in this day and age as consumers, we're much more interested in, what can you do for me? And can you layer in other services that make it more convenient for me? 5 years ago, you might have looked at this space, Home Depot in North America, who are in the same space as B&Q in the UK. You might have called it the DIY sector. Today, you might call it the DIFM sector, the do it for me, rather than the do it yourself. I'm more of a damage it yourself person, so I like to pay people to do it if I can afford it, and I can find the right people. So you go into Home Depot's website, and if you scroll down the homepage, you can see, find an expert to help with your home project. Free delivery. We deliver curbside because we recognize that during COVID, that's become a way for you to have your order fulfilled and feel safe sitting in your car. We pop things in your trunk, in the boot of your car. You can search by an image or voice on our website. Brilliant. Voice search, fantastic. You can see what's in stock before you waste your time coming to one of our big sheds. And there's free in-store pickup. You can tell, and there's financing below. You can tell this is a brand that's thinking of itself as a service provider and not just as a business that sells stuff. How do you meet the needs of Gen Z and millennials? I've got two of them at home. My youngest daughter is essentially an archetype of Greta Thunberg. She's an activist in every sense. I get reverse mentored around the dinner table pretty much every night. So I've learned an awful lot about that. So much so I was able to write a whole chapter on Gen Z in my book, The Power of Customer Experience. This is ClearPay, who are one of the leaders in the buy now, pay later space. And what's tending to happen is that younger consumer doesn't want credit cards. They want to either pay cash or have the ability to buy now, pay later, but they start their journey on the shop directory and then choose which websites to go to. So if you have a big Gen Z millennial customer base, that's something you might be thinking about. If you've got a physical presence, you might be looking at what Amazon are doing, and you'll be aware that Amazon have been opening up these Amazon Go stores in the States. They've opened up their first one in the UK. You literally can go in, pick up some groceries, walk out. You don't need to take your credit card or your debit card out of your pocket or out of your purse. They've found a way to use fintech and technology to take the money from you automatically. I have to say that in Glasgow, we've been doing this for years. We don't need the technology. We've just been picking up and walking out the shop. Tesla and some of the car brands are now thinking about how they disintermediate their space. I first came across a Tesla outlet in my local shopping centre in North London, at Brent Cross, probably about 6-7 years ago, I reckon, they first opened there. And I remember seeing this and thinking to myself, why on earth is a car dealer opening up in a shopping centre? And then it became obvious to me straight away, they're empowering me as a consumer. They're saying, we'll bring our products to you, rather than the traditional model, which is you need to go to a car dealership who are outside of town somewhere, 8 miles away, and not handy if you don't drive in the first place. Anyway, thinking about how you might disintermediate within your own sector, whether that's business to business or business to consumer, would be another thing to think about. And of course, one of the key drivers for anybody to buy from anyone is trust. And it's something that has to be earned. People don't just give you that. You've got to prove to them that you're worthy of that. And one of the ways that some retailers have been doing this is interesting. Shoe have done this for years now, the leading footwear retailer, where you can see here, you've got 1 year to return your product. You'll see other brands talking about a 365-day returns proposition. And you kind of look at that and you go, really? How can you enable somebody to send it back, sort of 10 months down the line? But of course, they never do. If you're going to return footwear, you're going to do it almost straight away because it doesn't fit you or you don't like it. So they recognize that this is not really an issue for them, but what they're doing is they're taking any stress away from customers that they might have, any concerns they might have about buying footwear online. Really like the design of that Converse boot, but not sure if it's going to fit me. So they're taking away that pressure. The next is about thinking big but acting local. And I think that one of the big issues that the big multi-channel retailers have faced in the last year, in fact, the last few years, and why a number of them aren't with us sadly anymore, is that they lost the whole concept of what retailing is all about. And when you go into a small independent retailer like Chloe James, which is a great fashion retailer in St Albans, you know, and you'll know this from your own experience, it's a bit of a voyage of discovery. You never know what you're going to find in there. They've got unique products you can't buy elsewhere. It's a great customer experience. You know, it's great service. It's very personal. Chloe and her team often know the people that are regulars coming into the shop. They know what you like, what you don't like. They've often got things kind of kept aside for you because they know that you're probably going to be in sometime soon. It's very different from walking into a big high street store. And one of the issues with the big high street retailers, I do mystery shopping all over the world. And whether I go to New York, whether I go to Sydney, whether I do it in Glasgow, Colchester, Exeter, London, Newcastle, wherever I've been, Hong Kong, you know, you get the same response when you ask people, when you ask customers about what don't you like about the what don't you like about the offline shopping experience anymore? They always say two things. There's never enough staff to serve you, number one. And number two, it's just the same. It's homogenous. You go from one big national chain into the next, and it feels too much the same. So my recommendation, if you are a bigger retailer, is empower the people that are running your stores locally to market locally. Have a local Facebook page. Don't worry about giving them a little bit more control. You know, we've got obsessed with this head office thing and not allowing anybody in the individual stores to make decisions. They know their customers better than we do. They know what they want to buy. They know who they are. They can merchandise the stores more effectively. They can suggest products that we might want to stock that might not be relevant across all the stores, and so on. So think big, but act local. Clearly, every business is going to need a hybrid model. For any of you that go into spinning studios, as I used to do on a regular basis on a morning. When's the next time I'm going to be doing that? Not sure, whereas I am doing that. I'm getting on my Peloton every morning and I'm having a spin at home. And even when I start going out more frequently, and I start going into the West End of London to have business meetings or wherever I happen to be going, I'm pretty confident I'm going to be doing my workout at home because I like the convenience of that. But some people still love the idea of getting back in there. And Cycle, which is the spinning studio I used to go to, have reopened, and I can see already through Instagram and social media that they've got decent sized classes of people coming in, but you need to have a hybrid model. I was interviewed a few months ago for one of the TV channels, and there was a theatre opening up in Canterbury, and it seated about 3,000 people. Now, obviously, this is way back in prior to the last lockdown, so this is way back in like September, October last year. And I think they allowed about 10%, and they had about 300 people in. And I was asked what I thought about that. I said, well, it was great. But I said, bearing in mind they can only have 300 people in, why are they not also allowing other people to basically view it digitally, to pay-per-view, you know, and watch it from home? You know, why have they not got some cameras in there? Why are they not doing a deal with Deliveroo or Uber Eats or Just Eat and having like a pre-theatre menu and allowing people to order food and have a theatre experience but in their house? So I think every business needs to think about having a hybrid model. Obviously, many of us are going to be working from home both now and in the future for at least part of the week. The next thing, which is normally it's really normally my first building block when I talk about how to be truly customer centric, is about putting your own people first. And one of the businesses that I think does a really, really good job of this is Timpson. So some of you will have had your keys cut there. Some of you will have had your shoes rehealed there. They're often known as, you know, Timpson the cobbler, but they're obviously a lot more than that. This is their upside down management model. I just love this. I first saw this about 5 or 6 years ago, because in most businesses, and most of the people that are on the webinar today, and my own experience would be, you'd be looking at something that was the opposite of this. Basically, it would be upside down from what you're looking at the minute. Management would be at the top and customers would be at the bottom. And when I mentioned earlier about this focus on cost to serve, I can assure you, businesses that talk about cost to serve, the model would be the opposite of this. Whereas Timpson recognise the best thing they can do is prop up and support employees in the business to deliver the right type of experience for customers. So after management comes all other employees. After all other employees comes employees who engage on the front line with customers. Why? Because they're the ones that ultimately determine how successful or not Timpson, you know, is as a business. And you may or may not know this, but Timpson also provides an opportunity for ex-prisoners to be rehabilitated. You know, in many cases, it's obviously very hard for people who've been to jail to find a job. Well, they do the opposite. They actually, obviously, they're still looking for people who display, you know, the right charismatic personality and everything, but they provide opportunities for people, and they trust them. They trust them to look after the money. They trust them to look after the till, and they trust them, more importantly, to look after customers. Another one that I often talk about, again, is Home Depot in Canada. They enable their staff to give away a $50 discount in store to customers. Why? To convert them, to create a sale. You know, if it's a big ticket product, then they'd rather capture that sale than lose it to someone else. So their staff are empowered to do the right thing for customers. They also look after them financially. When staff have financial emergencies, they help them out. They encourage them to go into further education, and they pay for it. They actually pay for everyone that goes into further education. And therefore their staff retention levels are through the roof compared to most businesses, as are Timson's. Not only that, when you look at their share price and their sales year after year after year, Home Depot are successful. Timson, year after year after year, they make money and they're a successful business. Businesses that do all this stuff well, it's no fluke. There's a clear cause and effect. If they look after their customers, they are commercially successful and over a sustained period of time. The next is about brands that deliver great experiences. Sorry to foist this upon you, but this is my ugly mug when I was doing mystery shopping, going into the CoverGirl store in Times Square, New York. You may or may not know this brand, but this is a beauty brand that historically had been sold through other people's channels of distribution. So they were a consumer packaged goods company, a manufacturer, but they sold through other people's channels. Then they decided to open up their own first store in New York. If next time you actually get on a plane and get to go to the Big Apple, I highly recommend you go there. It's just a brilliant experience. They've got training going on. They've got staff giving product knowledge. There's just a great vibe in there. There's music. And then of course there's great technology, right? So this is using augmented reality and virtual reality to pick up products and not actually physically have to try them on. You just pick up the product and it kind of superimposes on you what your eyeliner might look like or what the lipstick might look like. Just great. And it's a bit gimmicky, but in reality, it's a great way of doing it. And not everybody wants to actually apply the product in the first place. It's also a good way of cutting down on all the samples, etc. The next thing I want to talk about is being where your customers are. Now that might sound a little bit obvious, but there's lots of businesses that still don't do that today. So what I mean by that is, again, if you buy into the concept of we live in a world of anything, anytime, anywhere, where consumers are essentially empowered to buy anything, anytime, anywhere, then you need to be in the right places. You need to be there at the right time. You need to be available and accessible in order for people to engage with you, or they'll go somewhere else. And for some brands, that might be an app. This is the Nike sneakers app. I'm a bit of a sneakers addict, and so I always want to know when their new products are coming out that I can try and get my hands on. Or it might be, again, physically starting your experience in the physical environment. You know, we live in a world now where 70% of customers who still buy in retail start their journey online. Right? They don't start their journey by going to the store. They want to know whether that store's got availability of the right products they're looking for in the first place, rather than waste their time. So they do their research online, but then they still, as you've seen already from the stats I showed you, most of them still make the purchase and the acquisition offline. But the flip side of that is people who start their journey in the store, but then conclude it online, particularly around products like furniture, bigger, bulkier items that you kind of need to experience first before you maybe have the confidence, you know, of buying in the first place. And one thing that brands are doing a better job of now is leveraging their solutions from brands, from businesses such as Hero. And what they do is, when your staff in a store have got downtime, it then makes them available to customers who are online and want to do a live chat. And of course, the difference is, rather than doing a live chat with somebody in the contact center who, bless their cotton socks, might be great at customer service, but might not actually know that much about the product. Whereas when you're engaging with somebody in the store, you can bet the bottom dollar they've got more visibility and more awareness of hopefully, of the products that they're selling. Although I've done some mystery shopping recently, you would say to the contrary. But it's a great tool to, again, make sure that that the staff in the store, that their time is being utilized effectively, but very much from with sales focus, and converting more and more customers online as well at the same time. And then what about contact centers? I had an experience I'm going to tell you about very quickly. A number of years ago, I had the privilege of being on the advisory board for a business called Wiggle, who are one of the leading cycling retailers. Brilliant business. At the time run by a very, very clever guy called Humphrey Cobold, CEO. He now runs Pure Gym. Had a tough time last year and a half, but coming out of that, he's a great guy. Built the business from 30 odd million to 140 million pounds, right? I've never done that with a business. So that was pretty great case study. But when I got involved in the advisory board, Humphrey and the marketing director at the time were doing a presentation, and there was quite a big lapsed customer base. I mean, it was in the many, many hundreds of thousands. And I was thinking to myself, that's kind of weird. Why is that so big? And a friend of mine sent me an email and said, oh, when he found out I was involved with Wiggle, he said, you've got to see this. He had ordered a part for a bike and he was getting frustrated, and the emails were going backwards and forwards to customer service. And he was saying, look, can you just call me at a time that's convenient for me so that we can arrange a time for you to send the right part? I'm going in a competition in a couple of weeks, so I really need to sort this out. And the email that came back said, dear Mr. Smith, I'm really sorry, but at the moment, we only talk to customers through live chat and email. I was astonished by this, but I knew what it was. It was an internet business, a pure play business that thought it could replace any form of human intervention with technology. And I still think you need that human intervention. And I said to Humphrey, have you not looked at putting in a contact center? And he said, have you any idea how much that would cost? We get thousands of emails every day. I said, so you've looked at the cost, but you haven't looked at the benefit. Again, that's the difference between thinking about customers in the context of their lifetime value and not just looking at them from a cost to serve perspective. Then you'd make a very different decision. They subsequently went on to implement a contact center. But not only that, we also made the suggestion that, why don't we start phoning up lapsed customers? Why don't we take some of the best, most valuable customers that have lapsed in the last year and ask them why they don't shop with us anymore? What might we find out from that? It's incredible how few businesses do that. Why wouldn't you want to talk to customers who used to spend a fortune with you and find out what was it that drove them elsewhere? There might have been a really simple reason, but then there might have been an issue with your business that you didn't know about that you could have addressed. And of course, being where customers are these days increasingly means being on somewhere like Instagram. So I don't know about you, but I'm a sucker for buying something on Instagram, sometimes on Facebook, probably more often on Instagram when I'm looking at people's stories. Invariably something pops up like this and I think, oh, that's quite interesting, let's go and have a wee look. Before you know it, I've dropped a couple of £100 buying a couple of a few new jumpers. And I think why that works really well and why social commerce is really starting to take off, obviously, is you're capturing people where they're spending more and more of their time, number one, but you're also capturing them when they're generally in a better mood. Now, obviously, we're not always in a good mood when we're on social media, depending upon, what channel we're on. Often when you're on Twitter, you might be reading something you don't agree with, so that's probably not the right place. But when you're on Instagram, Facebook, generally you're in quite a convivial mood, so it's quite a good opportunity to capture somebody with a spontaneous purchase. The next thing I'm going to talk about is putting purpose before profit. Businesses that start with profit, and that's the number one objective, are not, and I guarantee you, are not customer centric. Because again, what they do is they make decisions that are only about short-term profit, only about the next 12 months, not necessarily about longer than that. And again, tend to have a cost to serve mindset rather than customers as a profit or looking at customer lifetime value. If you put purpose first, you will become a more profitable business. And probably the best example of that anywhere in the world is Patagonia. So the outdoor brand that many of you I'm sure will have bought from, often when you go to the homepage of their website, like I did a few weeks ago, they're not pushing products. They're not trying to sell you stuff. They're actually promoting causes because they're a cause-led business. One of the main categories on links on their top navigation is activism, what they are doing to create a better world for us and for other people who need their support. And in this case, it's the Gwich'in, who are an indigenous population in Alaska, who are having their homes ruined, their home environment ruined by oil and gas companies who are drilling and destroying the environment, right? They're supporting that. Patagonia, whatever survey you look at in the States, because they're better known in the States, but whatever survey you look at, they're always in the top 3 most trusted brands in America, always, year after year. and they're worth over $1 billion, so they're very successful business, and not surprisingly commercially successful year after year after year, because they put purpose before profit. Brands with a clear sense of purpose, according to Kantar research, enjoy a 175% increase in their brand value over a 12-year period. So this was quite a big study they did, and this was compared to brands who don't have a clear or clearly communicated sense of purpose, who might still enjoy 60 or 70% growth or increase in their brand value. But the brands that do put purpose first have more than 100% more value or increase in the value of their brand over that period. The next thing I want to talk about is diversity. And diversity is broader than you might perceive, but it's both morally and commercially the right thing to do. So let me give you some examples. Obviously, Black Lives Matter has been top of mind for everyone. The BAME community, how we address and how we deal with ethnic communities is massively important. Gender is massively important. Sexuality, where people come from, or they come from disadvantaged backgrounds, but also disabled customers in the disabled community. And you might be somewhat surprised to know, or you might not, you might be disabled yourself. Both my daughters, who I mentioned earlier, have a hidden disability. One's deaf in one ear, one has Crohn's, and one of them actually was in a wheelchair for a number of years prior to having a hip replacement. So, I've seen through their adversity and through our own lived experience of some of the challenges they face when it comes to engaging with consumer-facing businesses. Consumer-facing businesses do a really, really poor job of addressing the needs of that community. And yet there are 14 million people in the United Kingdom. Nearly 25% of the population have some form of disability. And yet there's not a day goes by where people, and I've seen it myself, and I've interviewed people with guide dogs, people who are visually impaired, who are being turned away from retail stores because the staff don't know any better. It's against the law to do that, but they don't know any better. They think they're doing the right thing by not letting somebody with a dog into the store. Or people who are visually impaired not being able to go in and have the right type of experience, or someone in a wheelchair who cannot get into the store because there isn't a ramp and there's a step there, or somebody who's in a wheelchair who can't reach up, to products. The list goes on, but the reality is, commercially, never mind morally, this is a massive missed opportunity for so many businesses, whether you're in the UK, the States, or wherever you happen to be. The next thing I want to talk about is conscious consumption. And we're not quite there yet, but there's no question we are moving there at pace. We're all becoming much more aware of what we buy and what the implications of that might be. We're starting to think about the supply chain. We're starting to think about how the brands that we're buying from, are they actually ethical? Are they actually looking after, their suppliers? What's the impact of buying something new versus buying something that's secondhand or has been upcycled or recycled? And another category that's going to become quite prominent as well is renting. So I genuinely believe that what you're going to find is, over the next couple of years, you're going to walk into the majority of retailers and you're going to find that there is a section in the store, yes, where you can buy new products. There's also a section where you can buy secondhand, or if you're in the luxury or premium space, we call it vintage. Or it might be an upcycled product that's been recreated from something else that used to be something else in the previous life. Or again, you might be able to rent. And you can start to see this with even some of the biggest brands like Asda, who were until recently Asda Walmart, Asda unveiling their secondhand clothing offer. So they're one of the top 4 biggest grocers in the UK, and they're starting to sell secondhand clothes in 50 of their stores across the UK. Following a trial. So, this is just the beginning, but for many brands, and you can see the growth of it. I'm sure some of you probably buy from some of the online vintage retailers now as well, selling the luxury brands that I spoke about earlier. This is going to be really, really prominent. And as consumers, as we become increasingly aware of our own carbon footprint and what the implications are of our behavior are on the environment, we're going to be paying much more attention to who we buy from and what we buy and whether they're catering for these needs or not. This is an interesting little model called the hierarchy of needs rather than the hierarchy of needs. Now, whether we'll actually really end up in this place or not, I don't know, but you can envisage it. Again, it's a little bit like the Timson model, where it's kind of the opposite to what you would imagine. Today, it's all about buying, but you can imagine in the future, in the not too distant future, that your thought process when it comes to needing something new might be, well, actually, you know what, I'm not going to buy it, I'm just going to use what I've got. Or actually, I'm going to borrow it from someone else, or maybe I'll swap something for somebody else that has what I'm looking, or I might thrift, I might make it, and eventually, if I can't do any of those things, I might buy it now. Will it look quite like that anytime soon? Probably not. But you can imagine that over time, we move down to that type of sort of psychological approach to retail. The next is about delivering seamless experiences. So I mentioned earlier about having the privilege of sharing a stage with Sir Tim Berners-Lee. And this is what most retailers look like today. They have silos, they have very separate departments within the business. I'll come back and talk about that in a second. So this is the World Retail Congress in 2015. That's me, Babita Sharma, BBC presenter, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, inventor of the World Wide Web, and a Frenchman, I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but he's the co-founder of the biggest private sales site in the world, Von Privé. And I got the first question, and this was the first question. A friend of mine took a photograph. They're all looking at me, and Babita Sharma turns to me and says, "Martin, you do a lot of work online. You do a lot of work in retail. What's next for retailers when it comes to the web?" And I was like, you know, I had a sort of 3 or 4 second rabbit in the headlights moment, because number one, I wasn't expecting the first question. When you've got the man who invented the World Wide Web sitting on your other side, I was expecting that question to go to him and not to me. But thankfully, I regained my composure and I said, it's not about the web. We live in a multi-channel world, but the problem is we've structured our businesses around channels and not around customers. Fast forward 6 years to 2021. Again, I engage with lots of consumer businesses and business-to-business companies on a daily basis, and I do not see too many businesses that have a joined-up experience. I see most businesses looking like that. You know, you've got a separate web team, a separate digital team, a separate technology team, often in different buildings, a separate team looking after the physical environment, the stores, whatever it happens to be. And there's not that connection. And that can manifest itself in so many different ways. But ultimately, what it does mean is that from a customer point of view, they don't have a joined up experience when they're engaging with you through all the touch points. And to use a term, I'm not a fan of some of the BS bingo in our industry, but omnichannel, which essentially really means, in my mind anyway, giving customers, it's not a customer facing term, but it really means how we ensure that we join all our channels and our touch points together so that a customer should be able to start a journey somewhere and complete it somewhere else. And our people and our systems should have that visibility of them. We should enable them to engage with us pretty much however they want. But at the moment, in many cases, that's not the case. 10 years ago, I wrote a column in Retail Week, and I talked about a customer being for life and not just for Christmas. You know, according to Harvard Business Review, a 5% increase in customer retention leads to a 25 to 95% increase in profit. Measure what really matters, and if you do that, you will retain more customers, whether that's net promoter scores, customer satisfaction, talking to lapsed customers, looking at customer service issues, web analytics, where are customers dropping off, why are they returning? These are the reasons, these are the things that we really need to know about. Average order values, conversion rates are good to know, but they don't really tell us what's happening. These are the things that actually tell us what's happening in our businesses. And how do we turn customers into fans? We increase a return on their involvement. We send them an offer when they make their first purchase. We send them a gift with purchase, or in this case, a random act of kindness. Levi sending me a face mask when I made a couple of purchases of jeans last year. Or my local barbers who have 240,000 followers on Instagram and they're 4 or 5 Greek Cypriot barbers, you know, because they cut great hair, they post the content, they share it on Instagram and people love them. You know, you could do the same thing. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and Maren will let me know if we have any questions that I can answer. And if not, I'd be very happy to take an email afterwards from anyone, martin@martinnewman.co.uk, if there's anything else you'd like to ask outside of the conversation now.
Thanks so much, Martin. There are a couple questions that came in. The first one, is there a danger of fragmenting brand identity or coming across as disingenuous by trying to connect with such different types of potential customers?
That's a really good question. Well, I don't think, I'm not suggesting that you try to be all things to all people. I think what you need to do, obviously, is be able to identify who your most important segments of customers are, and that's who you cater for. I absolutely am not an advocate of trying to be all things to everyone. So make sure you know who those most important segments of customers are, and then you make sure you provide a proposition that's relevant for them. That's the way I would go. Segmentation, understand customers, and tailor everything that's appropriate for them.
Great, thank you. And then a second question here, you shared the example of Patagonia, which I think is a great example, since that e-commerce businesses are so focused on social responsibility right now. How are you seeing companies use digital channels outside of the web to accelerate their ability from an ethics and social responsibility perspective?
Well, I don't think we're really there yet. And you know, if I were on the client side right now, for example, working in a business-to-business environment or working in a retailer selling to consumers, I might want to think about, you know, providing them with some kind of carbon footprint monitor, you know, something that would empower them to get closer to their behavior and what the implications of that are. That might be a tool that it would certainly endear them to a business if you were the ones to give them that ability to have more visibility over the impact of their own behavior. It's just one idea. But the other is kind of traceability. You know, I think anything you can do to prove to customers that you are genuinely on your supply chain and every aspect of your business, looking at how you can continue to be a more sustainable business. And I think if you can leverage digital in a way that empowers customers to maybe look inside your business and see actually that you're doing something about all these things, would be another way of really deepening their engagement with you as a brand.
Great, thank you. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for having me. Thanks to everybody for being on.
We're going to close out today's session. The webinar playback will be available. I do see a few more questions here, so we'll follow up definitely via email post-event. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.